I am so excited for this next session. Where is she? There she is. Everyone, please take your seats. Thank you. Our next speaker joins us from rainy, coffee-fueled land of Seattle, Washington, where she lives with her husband and 2 kids. Everything she's about to say is guaranteed to be funny, insightful, and compelling. No pressure at all. So be ready to subscribe, rate, and review her podcast immediately after this talk. She is not only smart, fun, and entertaining, but she is also a fierce advocate in the rare disease community. We are so lucky to have her in our rare disease community. She has a son who's 8 years old, who has a neurodevelopmental disorder called CTNNB1. She hosts the Once Upon a Gene podcast, where along with her guests, they tackle the joys and challenges and all other aspects of rare disease with education, humor, heart, and empathy. I have had the pleasure to be a guest on Effie's amazing podcast and immediately fell in love with her. Just to have the opportunity to have a conversation with Effie is a gift, and if not, you can listen to all of her conversations with everybody who has that gift. She has traveled the world advocating for families like ours, but today she is especially grateful to be right here in sunny Florida, out of rainy Seattle, lounging by the beach with all of us. And everyone she left in Seattle is crying at home. But we are so happy to have you here today. When I called Effie, I said, you've spoken to more rare disease parents than I think anybody, and she wants to share those insights that she has learned with us all today. So I welcome the one and only Effie Parks. Woo! No pressure. Yeah, right.
First, I want to say, Avi, that was so awesome. Thank you for infusing parents like me with so much hope about my son's future and his abilities. And just to remind us to keep digging. It's so important because sometimes we can get lost in all of that. So thank you very much. And thank you all for inviting me here. I'm so happy. I love family conferences more than anything, and I love everyone seeing other kids like their kids, and I know there's lots of feelings involved in that, and I know that these conferences can feel a little overwhelming in lots of ways, but that's totally normal, and it can take a long time to process it. Let's see. So in our world, experiences and understanding really do go hand in hand, and I think the best way for me to explain some of this is to help you understand it through stories. So I'm going to start with a story today. I want to start by picture this super hot, way hotter than it is right here right now in Florida, night in August in Seattle. It was a night that I remember for a bunch of different reasons, but I'm going to tell you right now that most of the reasons ended with me saying a lot of F words. It was one of those days. So it's early evening, it's August, it's so hot, we're having a super rare heat wave, and Seattle gives us rainy, dark skies like about 9 months out of the year. So when summer comes around, it is life-giving. I'm like Timothy Green. I am just obsessed with blue skies and the sunshine, so I soak it up as much as I possibly can. But unfortunately, most of the houses in Seattle, in Washington really, don't have air conditioning. So on this particular day, my house had reached 92 degrees inside, and it was a lot. So I was doing everything I could to keep it as cool and calm as possible. We weren't using any electricity. We didn't have our lights on. I wasn't cooking. We were just surviving the heat. But by the time my husband, Casey, gets home from work, I'm super ready for a break, especially in the summer. As many of you know, it is not very easy to just pack up and head to the park to kill some time. Going anywhere usually takes several hands and a binder's worth of planning sometimes. So when there was no family to come help me this summer, we just didn't leave the house that day. So after a really long day with the kids, trying to work and keep everyone cool and entertained, in my sauna of a house, my husband Casey, his return was definitely the next best thing to central air, for sure. The minute he walks in the door, I'm super impatient and I wait for him to get out of his suit, because that's when I get to take my chance to just like check out and run away and go chill for a second and decompress. And it must be more complicated of a process to get out of a suit than I understand, because the time going from his tie to being in his t-shirt, it moves at a glacial pace. So I definitely am impatient sometimes at that point. It seems to drag. Now, my son Ford, like many of yours, is nonverbal, and he has autism, and he has this unmistakable squeal that can either be a squeal of joy or a squeal of a siren who is so frustrated, and it can go on for 10 hours a day sometimes. So one of my non-negotiable self-care items that I have for myself is a pair of noise-canceling headphones. They are my lifeline sometimes. And I put these bad boys on, and I find my little pocket of me time and a little bit of quiet. And I mean, I found that even if someone is there to sort of entertain Ford or take care of the kids, and I go and take my little moment, if I can still hear Ford and his squeal, whether he's happy or frustrated, it instantly snaps me back into mom mode, and I really can't detach and relax. So I'm very grateful for my headphones, and they're a mandatory piece of my self-care if I'm unable to go further than the garage. So on this particular day, after my husband was officially done changing, I put on my headphones, I grabbed a glass of wine, and I was running outside to chill and call my friend Gay. Now, Casey is a total nerd, and I mean way nerdier than you could even imagine. And when I asked him to read over what I was going to say today, he was a little offended that I didn't tell you how handsome he was. So he's a very handsome nerd. And he has this hideous gaming chair. He doesn't get the luxury of using it anymore, but I haven't gotten rid of it, and it lives in our garage. I can't stand looking at it. It is really ugly, but it's very comfortable. So I wrestle the chair out when I take my moment to run away, and I plop down in it, and I sit outside in the garage, and I make my phone calls, and I do whatever I'm doing to just chill out in the sun. And as I'm out there, Ford just wheels down the ramp and comes out there, and he is just absolutely delighted with himself. Like, he's beaming. And his face and his legs have something smeared on it, which I just assumed was marker. My daughter keeps her markers out on the table at all times. And I was super happy because I thought they were like playing together. And I was like, Ford, oh my gosh, are you coloring with your sissy? And he just cackles at me and squeals and wheels away. And I didn't think anything more of it. And later, once the kids were in bed, I'm stretched out on the couch and I'm trying to cool down and I'm just relaxing from the rest of the day. And my husband, Casey, comes up to me and he's holding something and he goes, babe. And he's holding what's left of my absolute favorite bright pink lipstick. It's called Flat Out Fabulous. And I was like, fudge, I just bought that. It's one of my favorites. I'm wearing it today. I kind of thought that was the end of it, and that I just need to replace the lipstick. But the next morning when I woke up to put on my tennis shoes, I noticed that there was pink all over the bottom of my shoes. And so I was like, oh, fudge. And so I get up to go walk around my house to see what has happened and to connect some of these dots. And I walk down the hall, and I've tracked it everywhere. There's pink everywhere. I walk through the living room. It's everywhere. Through the kitchen, into my living room. After I'd taken my shoes off and walked around again, it's all over the couch where I had plopped my feet up earlier that night. And I had unwittingly made my house flat out fabulous. And I was muttering the F word a lot as I was walking through the house. knowing that this lipstick is never coming out. I can put this on one time and do 100 things and eat every meal, and nothing will take this lipstick off. So I'm already sad for my couch. And then all of a sudden, I just had something wash over me, and I started laughing. Because here's Ford, my child who, like many of yours, was given a list of cannots and will nots, only explanations of everything that he wouldn't ever be able to be or achieve, and that he would be locked in his body. And yet, with his severe movement disorder, he had wheeled into my bathroom. He had opened my drawer. He had grabbed the lipstick and opened it. And in hindsight, he had used it correctly. And what he also did was he wheeled out that day to revel in his mischief. To tell me that he had done something funny. And that he had done this sort of classic mischievous kid thing that most parents would groan about. But for me, it was this realization. And it was magic, and it was absolutely flat out fabulous. And in those bright pink smudges, I saw Ford expressing himself. And I saw a moment of pure kid joy. And it was an example of what he's capable of. It took physical abilities, cognitive abilities, awareness, and just sass. All the things they said he wasn't going to have, by the way. And yet there he was, leaving his own bright pink echo of resilience all over our home. I think I had a slide, but I forgot. That's okay. So anyways, what my point is by telling this story is that there is so much power in paying attention to these small moments. As chaotic and frustrating as it seems, there's magic in seeing our kids do things that for other families would just be an annoyance. Oh, perfect. So here's my first message for you today. We're gonna be okay. Life in our world is filled with so many moments of hard, but somewhere in all of that, there's so much good if we train ourselves to chase those glimmers. There are these echoes, these little reminders of resiliency and beauty throughout the day. So while yes, there are so many F words in this life, sometimes in the middle of a heat wave, after an unplanned home makeover, those Fs, again, stand for flat out fabulous. So I have a question. How many of you in this room know what chromosome FOXG1 is on? So I started my podcast, Once Upon a Gene, the Halloween before COVID. And I remember this because I was still trying to keep my job and a career as a hairstylist. I had a beautiful salon downtown in Seattle, and I had a loyal and loving clientele. I would spend 4 days a week, 10, 11 hours a day with people, hearing all about their lives and their joys and their struggles. And I loved that part, that connection, though after having my son, their problems seemed harder to engage with. It would take some people out when their Starbucks order was 2% instead of non-fat, and I would listen to it for a long time, and I was like, babe, it got to be really, really hard. I spent months running on empty, working a full-time job, and then coming home and working another one, as you all know. And in the midst of this marathon, I had my very first real-life meeting with Nasha. She was in Seattle, and our mutual friend Mike had told us that we had to meet. And my salon was luckily connected to a really cool bar. So after I was done that day, I just, cleaned up really fast, and I just ran across the hall to meet Nasha. And we ordered a glass of rosé, and we sat down, and in true Nasha fashion, she looked directly at me, and she said, "What chromosome is CTNNB1 on?" And I completely froze. I wasn't sure if I'd forgotten, if I didn't know, if I was thinking about the Exxon, maybe, or if I had been huffing too many hair color chemicals that day and I just forgot. Anyways, I had blanked it out. I didn't have an answer to give to Nasha. And again, Nasha looked at me with that loving expression that we all know, and she said, the next time someone asks you that question, you need to know the answer. It was such a simple statement, but it stuck. And in that moment, I realized that understanding our own story wasn't just about personal knowledge. It was about empowerment, about being able to advocate effectively, and to educate others. I've learned that knowing your story is the first step toward making a difference. And telling your story is more impactful than you realize. But understanding it deeply and being able to share it in any context and to frame it best for which audience you're speaking to and why gives you a power that no one can take away from you. You're the person who's going to be able to inform a doctor who's never seen your child's condition before. You're the person who's going to be able to communicate with researchers or maybe translate medical reports or records or to share the most effective message in an FDA listening session. And to raise conviction, or to raise funds with conviction through your story. Your story is going to help other families who are facing the same terrifying diagnosis for the first time. And as Once Upon a Gene grew, which was quickly, I realized just how far these stories could reach. And the most popular downloaded episode so far is actually an episode with Nasha. And it's an episode about how to start a patient advocacy org. I've talked to so many people who were moved by that episode because it convinced them of something important. It convinced them the second thing that I hope you take away from this, that we are not helpless, and that just because doctors told you to go home and love your child, that doesn't mean they're right. Countless families have told me that because of that episode, they've went on to start foundations. That episode convinced people to show up as advocates in so many other ways also. And it gave them a roadmap, and it helped them see that they could understand their own story and they could do something about it. And that was all they needed. Mouth is so dry, I'm sorry. Anyways, people learn that they can make a difference, whether it's in your home with your family or at the White House. We're not helpless. Our story is proof of that, and knowing your story and sharing your story and helping others see that they're not alone, these are powerful acts. And when we do it, we start to understand that no matter how impossible this journey seems, we have strength and knowledge and resilience. We can't control everything, but we can claim our story. And we can share it in a way that creates change, whether that's through educating a doctor, inspiring another family, or showing the world the strength that we do carry. I told you that when I had that meeting with Nasha, I was clinging to my career as a hairstylist because I loved the connections that it gave me to other people. And I did obviously end up giving that career to take care of my son, and I found a new way to connect with people, and it is so much better. I'd also like to add that your co-founder, Nicole, she's actually one of the OG storytellers. She had a blog about Josie, which is how Nasha found her when she was desperately searching. Nicole told her story. Someone found her. And every single one of you are here today because of that story. And by the way, Nasha, Ford's gene is on chromosome 3. And finally, I want you to remember that you are not alone. Look around this room. These are your people. They get it. I get it. And beyond this room, there are 100 more rare orgs just like us. families facing the same challenges, sharing the same hopes, and finding strength together. I know how isolating this journey can be, and I know the depths that it can take us to. I know some of you feel like you can't take a deep breath. I know some of you grind your teeth so hard at night that you wake up with headaches. I know that some of you have a constant ache in your stomach from stress. We all carry our own version of it. But you're not alone in this. We've all been there, and we're all here to lift each other up and to find our happiest, healthiest selves so that we can withstand this very long haul. As much as I've spoken publicly about Ford and about our rare life, even after 5 years, my voice still shakes. And it frustrates me sometimes, like, why does it still shake? I know my purpose, I know my story, and it still quivers every single time. But maybe that quiver is an echo. An echo of the love that makes this journey so profound and so difficult. Maybe it's the reminder that even though I know my story, it's continuously evolving. The quiver tells me that this journey moves me deeply, and that each word I share has weight. And that our connection to each other and our kids is what drives every single one of us forward. So my final message to you is, you're not alone. Even when things feel impossible, remember that you're surrounded by people who understand, even if they're all on the internet. People who will help you carry the weight. And on those days when you're not okay, which is also okay, reach out and know that sharing your story and in knowing your story deeply, you're creating echoes of resilience. You're building strength, not just for yourself, but for all of us. So while our voice might still shake, we're still here, and we're still together, and we're making a huge impact. We're reminding each other and the world that in the midst of all this chaos, and no matter the heartbreak, that we're gonna be okay. We are not helpless. And we're stronger than we know. And we are never, ever, ever alone. Thank you.